Totally.
Remember, and he's like, they're like quite uncomfortable trying to figure out.
We're missing the cap.
Cool. This is mine.
Yeah.
Is this on? Are we? I think maybe we're ready to go. Clap if you can hear me.
There.
Perfect.
We haven't even started.
Are we supposed to start? Do we shut the doors?
I mean, the clock is ticking.
Yeah, the clock is ticking.
It seems relevant.
We only have 35 minutes to begin with to cover all of tokenization of the real world. So.
No big deal.
I mean, this is, Andrew, probably our 480th panel together.
Give or take. Yeah.
But the rest of these gentlemen I haven't spoken with before. Thanks for joining us, guys. We're going to have fun with this. We're talking about real world assets, tokenization. Some people in our world talk about the tokenization of everything eventually. I think it's fun because I was joking with Andrew earlier. The first panel that I was on talking about this topic at an FII, we were out in the food area, like in front of a little screen, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. And then now we're in a little bigger room, and I think next year, or within the next couple of years, it's going to be a main stage conversation for sure, and I think across so many of the panels, because we certainly all believe that this is something that is early, big enough now, and happening at a meaningful enough scale to be worthy of real conversation and understanding, and pretty soon something that very few people in whatever industry you touch are very few people will not know what is happening and be thinking about ways to be involved with tokens in some capacity. There are probably people in this room that don't even know fully what we're talking about. So what I thought I would do is use a couple of introductory questions to address what is tokenization, and let the group here as we get into a first question, take a minute, say who you are, say why this topic matters to you, and then we'll start. Maybe we're going to start with just to my left. We'll start with Andrew, and tell everybody what you're doing, your perspective on tokens and how you most closely interact with tokens and securities tokens in particular, and then we'll go down the line.
Yep, great to meet everybody. My name is Andrew Durkee. I'm president of Republic. We're a large digital merchant bank out of New York, one of the most regulated crypto firms in the United States. A huge focus on tokenization. We've been doing it now for 8 or so years. It's funny, a year ago, no one used the term RWA, real world asset. This is really has come on pretty aggressively in the past year, and it's from a mixture of things. Obviously, I think BlackRock did us all a huge favor by adding an additional level of legitimacy to how they're looking at the space. But every major bank and institution is taking this incredibly seriously. I love to use. There's a Citibank report that came out earlier this year. They anticipate that around $4 billion of assets will be tokenized by 2030. And to give you guys kind of a reference point, like all of private equity, $4 trillion.
Right?
4 trillion.
We're at about 12 billion now.
Right. And so 4 trillion by 2030, and to give you a reference point, all of private equity and venture is about 7 trillion. So that's going to span a lot of different things, but ultimately we're seeing it move in this direction, and we've already kind of passed the tipping point where now it's an inevitability, right? So everything is running at this pace, running in that direction at a furious pace, and we're going to probably talk about a lot of those initiatives here. I think a lot of what you'll hear about here is actually not conceptual in nature, which is a big difference than from a couple years ago. You're going to hear about things that are actually being executed on, and that's really exciting.
Okay, and before I go to Eric, just one finer point on this. What do you mean when you say assets will be tokenized versus otherwise? Yeah,
so if we just look at securities in general, they really haven't changed in 100 years. They've just been the same thing, right? And it's some type of financial instrument that people participate in. They hope there's some type of financial gain or return that takes place on the end of that. And that fundamentally is going through a shift now as we look at the tokenization or the digitization of these assets. This unlocks a lot of different features, and most commonly you'll hear about finality and settlement and speed and custody and ownership. Those are all massive innovations that come around tokenization. One of the areas that we're particularly focused on at Republic is now there's the ability to build utilities onto these securities. So where previously you had a security, again, it was just that financial instrument. Now we have the ability to add utilities that you get benefits by having that instrument the length, how you have that, the length of how long you've had that instrument, how you use that instrument, and there's almost a endless amount of opportunity that's created around that, particularly around how retail itself will touch and interface with the asset.
Okay, I think it's going to become even more obvious as we talk about.
I know. I feel like I'm just going to blow. I've just got to
well,
open
I
that.
mean, we're going to get there. I mean, Eric, you are the president of Crypto.com, one of the top 10 exchanges in the world now, I believe.
Top 5, right? I mean, there's a big report. You guys just
count.
Well, they just beat out Coinbase.
They just top 2.
Yeah, they just beat out Coinbase in volume yesterday.
It's a good trend.
I have seen a bunch of days now where you actually are beating Coinbase in volume. So all right, you're also dealing in tokens, obviously, and coins, or however people have thought about this. What is different about the tokens you deal with than what maybe Andrew's talking about when he's referring to really tokenization of what was previously issued equity securities?
Yeah.
And how are you, as a crypto exchange, going to participate in this $4 trillion securities tokenization that Andrew's talking about?
Yeah, so Crypto.com, we started getting access to digital assets, but crypto-native assets, so those that are there like Bitcoin or Ethereum that are powering the protocols, and then those that are building and adding governance and other utilities to decentralized protocols on top of that infrastructure. Today we have about 300 plus assets that are crypto-native. The next layer, if we get closer to tokenization of real-world assets, is the tokenization of fiat money. And this is actually the most successful use case today of tokenization of financial instruments. It's roughly about $160 billion of assets of fiat money tokenized.
These are stable coins that we've heard about, what people most commonly hear.
And generally, tokenization for me is democratizing the ownership of assets that have historically been difficult for the general public to access. Fiat money and dollar, maybe in the US is very common, but in emerging markets it's not. And even moving US dollar, for most people, especially cross-border, is costly, take time. With the blockchain, the finality is super instant, and the fees are much lower. So that's, for me, the first use case. But the bigger pie is definitely in securities and alternative assets. I've seen reports that expect the share of tokenized assets in decade to be 30 trillion. So even going bigger, I think it's Standard Chartered Bank that did that one. So the opportunity is definitely there, but the nature of the underlying asset does not necessarily change. So if you want to distribute a tokenized security, you may still need to be a broker-dealer and have the right disclosures and parameters around that. So that's going to be I think we should discuss, how do you get distribution for tokenized asset? Fiat money, I think now have frameworks, fit for purpose regulatory laws that have started to be in place in Singapore, in Europe, in the UAE as well. But for other assets, I think there's a journey there.
So, I mean, that's super interesting. So as we talk about the tokenization of everything, and we talk about specifically tokenizing certain things, and we think 12 billion or so tokenized value of things other than money.
Funds,
and then you talk about stablecoins, and you say, so I think for some of us that have been in crypto for a while, on the one hand, like you had Tether as one of the earliest projects, and most people have probably heard of Tether. But there was a period of time where actually people started to think that tokenizing fiat was actually going to be very hard and regulated out of existence. And we went through a whole phase in maybe 2016 to 2020 or so where there were a lot of questions about whether that business was even viable as a project. And now cut forward to 3-4 years, and it's, as you said, 160 billion. It is dominating by 10, 12, 15x the tokenization of any other thing in the world. How did that happen, and what's going on there?
I think the use case is very clear for people. First, the access to the dollar. Second, the ability to move money, stable via a fiat currency, globally, instantly, at low fees. I think that use case alone is very powerful for retail, but also for institutions. We were the first to do a B2B transfer of stablecoin between Visa and our company, because we have one of the largest card program in the world. And settlement time and the amount of float you have to put in a card program to make sure over the weekend you will be able to settle all the transactions is huge. But now we can settle any day, any hour using stablecoins. So we don't have to put so much capital to waste. So this concrete use case not only for retail, but also businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was hoping
to add to that. I mean, there's a really big reason why stablecoins have gotten big very, very quickly. There's a number of regional jurisdictions. There's a number of jurisdictions that have put out now regulatory frameworks that have made stablecoins much more viable. MiCA has very particular stablecoin legislation. What's going through the U.S. Congress right now also has very clear stablecoin regulation. And so that has made people comfortable enough to start to participate in that. Like BlackRock just rolled out their stablecoin.
Yeah.
Like they're not making that bet unless they ultimately know that this thing is going to be moving in that direction. I think by the halfway through next year, you're going to have hundreds of stablecoins. Every bank will have its own because they're going to use that for interest settlement almost certainly. Because now, again, compliance-wise, they'll be able to get it through their counterparty risk committee and their compliance committee and all the things that have held them up previously. So that's really the big multiplier.
Okay, so I mean, you're hitting on regulation. We're going to come back to that because it's super important for this conversation. And Eric, you said what I was hoping you would, which was use case, right? And so what we have with stablecoins is in a way that has so far been somewhat tough to define, like a real clear use case and benefit of this particular application of crypto. I'm gonna start the other way now. Don, you've been a banker and an investor in the sports entertainment sectors for a long time now, decades, and specifically with a tremendous amount of experience in sports.
Yes.
Now, one of the, if not the biggest, next application of securities tokens, an industry to be tokenized, on the top 2 or 3 list of everybody that knows the space, it's sports. And so give us a few minutes on why you think sports in particular is such a great application of this technology to really demonstrate its value.
So let me just take a step back for a moment. I think that sports and I'll call it blockchain technology, there's a lot of use cases, right? And I think we've sort of maybe jumped a step as we talk about ownership, and I know this is not going to be popular to say. If you think about what's gone on in the sports world globally, traditional private equity has just now been allowed in, right? If you think the NFL literally this year for the first time is allowing private equity, something that everybody in this room is very familiar with. It's a business model that's been around for a long time. They're just now allowing it. The reason why is you have regulators, and I know we'll get to this. The idea that now we're going to do something that's less organized, right? That's harder for the old people, rich people who own these teams to understand, to let them in, I think is complicated. I think there's places where it'll happen, right? The smaller startup leagues. But if you think about an NFL or an NBA, I think we're a long way off. However, right, the reason why I'm excited about this is there's a use case that I like to talk about that relates to the one-to-one relationship between a team and their fan base. And I think the use case that is been, I think, dabbled with when you think about things like Top Shot is the idea that I can actually, as a team, sell something to a fan that has a real interest, and I can have a relationship that's forever. Mm-hmm. And the obvious place is ticketing. And when I think about, our space where we're selling season tickets for hundreds of thousands of dollars to very wealthy people, there should be a relationship where, right now what it is there's a concierge who sends you text messages and says, hey, do you want free tickets to things? There should be a relationship where I am being sent digital collectibles, right, because I have a ticket. Now, there's lots of reasons why that's hard, but I do think that there's a future where if I'm a team owner, what I want at the end of the day is I want subscribers, I want members, and I want them to pay me on a monthly basis. In order for that to happen, I have to give them things. The best way to give them things is to understand who they are and understand what they want. And I can do that on the chain. And I think that's exciting. When we jump to ownership, all we're talking about here with securities, and I'm, ex-Morgan Stanley banker, is how to make money, right? And that's kind of skipping what we need first is the use case that actually improves the business model, right? And I think we got to start with the business model and then move to the point about speculation and making money. The reason why Top Shot, you know, it was great when it started, but then it just became about making money. And if I'm a father trying to get my kid excited about these things, and I look at the marketplace, and he really wants that LeBron James thing, but it's $5,000, I never open that app again.
Yeah.
That's it, I'm done. And that's where I think the speculation in the market actually hurt the adoption of this technology.
So let's drill in a little bit on specifically why blockchain technology and tokens, for example, allow you to, as you said, give your fans or the owners of these tokens things that in a way or that you couldn't do otherwise. And I know Eric Pulier is out here somewhere. I mean, it takes me back to 10 years ago, like way pre-NFTs when we were running around and Eric has been preaching for a decade or longer about how it would have been such a better name than NFT to call these things smart networked digital objects. And like, help us understand that and like what's unique about the idea of owning a token versus owning a membership in a traditional way. Yeah.
So if let's say I have my season ticket to the Brooklyn Nets, and first of all, if I sell it, they know that I'm not in the building, right, which is important for the team owner. But more importantly, think about a world where I go to the game, right, and they know that I'm there with my family, and as I'm going home, let's say that there's a game-winning shot. I've had this euphoric moment with my family, with my son, and all of a sudden I get sent a thing that says, hey, for $50, you can buy this collectible, right, and we'll deliver it right to your device right now, and I can show it to my son. And by the way, that's an asset that he can have for the rest of his life. I'm doing that, right? That's exciting to me. When it comes to collectibles that are, you know, if you start with what baseball cards were, in this world, Panini stickers, we all grew up with this physical object. We jumped the step of all of us growing to love these objects, and we need to start with that. And that's where we've just, and I know I'm not saying this is not popular, we moved too fast. Right, we moved into speculation and collectibles before we moved into the adoption. And I think that these assets, because of the ability to collect data about who actually owns them, and at some point the team will know all about what my profile is, I can create things that I'll pay for. And it's about monetization. But it's monetization that I'm happy to do as opposed to, God, I got to go pay some guy who speculated, who waited for the drop, and I got to pay him a lot of money. I know he's going to make a lot of money. I'd rather do it with the team and know that I'm interacting with something that's more stable.
Yeah, I mean, all we've been hearing for the last 3 days is about the value and importance of data. And it's like now we're talking about things where in an opt-in, enthusiastically opt-in way, people who own these tokens and possess them are reachable at all times. And yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Huafeng, so tell us about your involvement in sports, and you're obviously in Asia in particular, but building a global business. How has tokenization of your business come into play recently?
Yeah, maybe first for context, I'm the president and co-founder of One Championship. We are Asia's largest combat sport property and also Asia's largest sports league by viewership. We're based in Asia. Most of our events are in Asia, but we do have some events in the US and some events in the Middle East, currently Qatar. We're broadcast in about 195 countries and about 60 plus live shows across the world. So just for context, we are the youngest of, I would say, the top 10, top 15 global sports properties. We were born in 2011. So we were born into the digital age. In some ways, our property is very much digital first, even in a Web 2 context. So I think for us, digital engagement with fans has always been top of mind. When it comes to tokenization, I think Don really hit the nail on the head. It's all about having a direct, formal, digital relationship with a fan. But I will also go beyond that to say that it creates a layer of transparency, verifiability, right? And a huge bespokeness to the kind of relationship you can have. Utility, of course, can be what Don said, receiving and buying an NFT. That's utility, right? Receiving a collectible, digital memorabilia. But actually what we have seen is, there's a whole plethora of things that you can do in terms of use cases. I'll give you an example. Fans want to have a say in what happens in your league. That's kind of next level. So we have actually conducted experiments where fans get to vote on the next matchup. Fans get to vote on where the matchup happens. And blockchain technology allows you to do this in a very transparent way for the whole world to see, which results in recognition. Your super fans are now going to get recognized for being super fans, and a lot of them want that. And ultimately, it's about monetization in the long term. But this is a business where fan engagement precedes monetization. So you have to get fans involved, and once they're involved, they have a say. They're highly engaged. You can monetize in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be a fan paying you. It can be a sponsor paying you to reach that fan, right? We have a very interesting use case which involves a fan interacting through a Web3 layer. And by the way, we haven't launched this yet. This is still in beta testing. But fans interacting with like a comic book that is based on our athletes. And and they enter some sort of a lucky draw, and the winner gets to donate proceeds to a charity of their choice. And all this is documented, right, on the blockchain because it is transparent. That increases recognition and community, a sense of community amongst the fans.
So, Eric, is there something, you mentioned crypto native projects and tokens versus tokenized securities or tokenized fan club interests, or however we want to think about that. Is there something to you as you hear this that makes you think that, for example, stablecoins and tokenizing money requires blockchain technology in a way that tokenizing a fan club or a season ticket or ownership in a team doesn't? Or is there something unique about tokenizing money that really that just requires crypto and Web3?
I think the attributes are different, and we've been very lucky to work with some of the biggest sports names in the world, like Formula One or UEFA Championships, and many other NBA clubs like 76ers or the Lakers. And we used NFT or digital collectibles, or the name that was coined maybe 10 years ago, but to enhance that fan experience. And that has been the main focus. I think, how do we give recognition to the super fans? How do we provide new experiences and also widen the fan base, even outside of the home country? Because our platform is global. We have 100 million users there. So people get exposed to the brand, get a sense of community, even if they're not locally. And then when they travel, or they have opportunities to get courtside tickets or meet the players, because they've shown they'd be a super fan, they get access to that. Mm-hmm. So at the end, the blockchains give you transparency and provability of ownership, and something that you own, as you said, forever. Especially with some tokens, you can't even move them. They're soul bound. So when you receive them, that's it. They can't move from your address. You can't even transfer them, which I think is very interesting in the domain of fan engagement and provability of commitment from the fans. So I think those underlying values from the blockchain are there. I think they serve, especially transparency and ownership. Provability is very useful in the domain of sports and fan engagement. It helps on stablecoins, but in a different way. I think it's the ability to move money that is across border instantly in a verifiable way without double spending. That is what is important for stablecoin more particularly.
Andrew, so we talked about use cases and we started with regulation. Let's talk about the impediments to people actually being exposed to and able to interact with this technology. Like beyond finding a reason to have it in the first place, like what's happening in the regulatory environment and what is going to be required for people to engage with tokens, ultimately to buy equity, let's say, in a sports team, but also just crypto in general, and where do you see the regulatory environment being both a beneficial to this and potentially a hindrance to it?
So that question is actually pretty easy, because right now you don't need anything regulatorily to change fundamentally. Everything we're doing in Republic is all built on 1930 securities law, right? And most of the people who are participating, don't know any better. As long as they're able to pass KYC AML, they're able to access basically the stack of solutions and technology. I think the bigger thing actually is not regulation. The bigger thing that we've seen is the technology has gotten to a particular place, and the consolidation of those services has taken now is in one integrated stack. So previously, if you wanted to interface with a security token, it doesn't matter if it was sports or anything, you'd have to work with like 5 different companies. You'd have to work with a tokenization company. You'd have to work with a primary issuance platform. You'd have to work with a custodian. You'd have to work with a transfer agent, a wallet company. You'd have to work with a secondary market. And you'd have to pass KYC every single time. And if you had to work with 5 or 6 different businesses to buy an iPhone. You just wouldn't buy an iPhone, right? Now you're starting to see the consolidation of that, where all of those services are in one stack. You only have to create one account. You only have to pass KYC once. Very similar to what we saw, like a Morgan Stanley or Fidelity did on the brokerage side. So that was actually the bigger step forward, was actually solving that problem, that friction point. We're talking about the digital collectible side. I actually really disagree with your opinion on it, because we see the other side. Like, we're doing the equity sales now, right? Collectibles, the NFT craze was a wild time. I really loved it because I thought it created a really good proof of concept around a lot of different initiatives. But we just simply saw that people wanted more. Maybe not as much on the financial speculative side. I actually do 100% agree with you on that. But the ability to then drive utilities around ownership, right? So like for us, if we take a percentage of a team, and we do this now, this is not like theoretical, we're doing this at scale, we can take 10% of an EPL team, tokenize that equity, build utilities into it. You have a certain amount of tokens, a certain amount of equity. You can meet the players, travel with the team. You have your own entrance to the stadium, your own parking, early access to season tickets. I mean, it's an endless amount of utilities that you can natively build into the asset that allows people to engage with the club more and the club to engage with them, while also having some level of ownership in that club that they can then have, indefinitely, or pass down to their kids or whatever. The thing that's amazing about sports is one of the very few true multi-generational assets. There's not a lot of those, right? Like, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan. It's a terrible relationship. It's like a bad marriage that I can't get out of. I've been a season ticket holder for 15 years. And listen, my grandfather's a Dolphins fan. My dad's a Dolphins fan. I'm a Dolphins fan. All my children are now unfortunately going to be Dolphins fans. And it really does transcend all these different generations. So, we fundamentally believe in the very near future that you will not be a season ticket holder without also being an equity holder. Those things will inevitably converge, whether that's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. I think we're going to march into that direction. And what we're seeing now, just like, we've got like a pipeline of 50 major franchises that are all going through this process with us.
It's like, as I hear that and we have this conversation, the one thing I was thinking though is, like, on the one hand, we're saying, amazingly, the regulations that were drafted 90 years ago still apply. But then I think to myself, there's no way that if that's the case, and actually those are the governing regulations, those were not drafted for the purposes we're talking about, or for the scale, or for example, every season's ticket holder to be an equity owner in a club and to be issued the equity. And so, like, and maybe we'll go back to Don if you've got thoughts on this. I see it.
We backed the tech into it, right? That's ultimately, we were forced to back it.
Like, what we're talking about for it to really work has to be scalable, and I do think it's got to be scalable in a regulatory way. And so I almost feel like, are we in a bridge period, or what do you think, Don?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge, right? Because I hear your point. Having fans have equity so they feel like they're part of the community makes a ton of sense. But we are living in a world where the NFL, as an example, will not allow their teams to go public. Like, just not going to allow it, right? So the idea that their equity, like, for me to go through the process, I run a private equity firm that invests in sports teams. We were approved by the NFL last year. I spent all summer with the league and their representatives calling my kindergarten teachers, right? That's the process that you had to go through. So what you're talking about, the bridge, and I know it's happening in the EPL, but it's happening in leagues that are less regulated. And I think what people forget is that when you have an NFL, an NBA, Major League Baseball, there's a regulator there beyond the SEC that just play by their own rules. And they are run by guys and gals who've been around for a long time. They don't understand this, and so they're scared of it, and so they back away. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I think we're a ways off. But I would love to see, in the meantime, a use case that starts to get them comfortable with it, right? Because if you get to that, if we get into a world, let's take the NBA, for example. We talked about the digital collectible. I know it's an antiquated term. Let's assume, go back to my son. I've collected these digital collectibles, and I've got a bunch of them, and he turns 14, and he wants to start playing NBA 2K. I would love to be able to give these assets to him and allow him to move that into that world, right? Right now, it's all these things that are siloed. He may not care about the collectibles, but he cares about his character in 2K. If he can all of a sudden turn that value into something that's valuable in that world, that means a ton. And to me, that's the use case that if we focus on that, then maybe what you're talking about comes for the major leagues.
Or what about Huafeng? Like, so
Yeah.
you're building a business. You run one of the biggest sports franchises in the biggest pro-crypto, rabid crypto part of the world by far, right? Like you got
Yeah.
people, like if there's anywhere in the world
Right.
that people are active, understand it, engaging with
Yeah.
it, and growing. And by the way, even from the regulatory standpoint, like you've had governments there that recognized, even I'm thinking of Japan and other places, but where they were tough on crypto, but they were fair and drafted clear regulations. Like you're seeing the benefits of that apply to the enterprise now. So maybe like to Don's point, like we've got to start with, and obviously it is in soccer, but again, like maybe it's whole new areas, and you're a fighting league,
Yeah.
and you control the league.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
like, is there a way, right? Like, do
No,
we need
yeah.
to show these owners that there's a way forward here that they do not want to miss?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between like the big legacy American leagues and like other leagues in the world. If you think about the UFC, ourselves, Formula One, I mean, us, UFC is listed, Formula One is listed. We're kind of a pre-IPO, company. And you're right, we actually control the leagues. We control the regulations. So this sort of like team ownership thing that we have to deal with, the commission of that's not a factor for us actually. Now, obviously, country regulations matter, right? In some countries, they're a lot more crypto friendly. Some countries are not. We all know the differences between, say, Dubai and China, right? Or the Emirates and China. But what I will honestly say is regulatory hurdles are not really top of mind for us. Everything that we see right now, it really is sort of a recognition that 10 years from now, this is going to be a huge market. It doesn't matter if it's a collectible, a team token, an athlete token, a knockout token, right? It doesn't matter, right? This is going to be a huge space. Today, I think penetration of NFT usage is only like 3 to 5%, in all sort of, sports. This is a long way to go. So for us, to be honest, the priority is not figuring out regulation. It actually, there's enough unregulated space for us to play in. It's about the deals that we're doing with Animoca, with Miston Labs. It's the partnership with Sandbox, right, that we will be announcing soon. And, as everyone has alluded to, there's so many use cases, especially when you have so many axes of utility. Some fans want to vote, some fans want free tickets, some fans want to own the knockout of the century, right? There's so many ways you can construct utility around a token when it comes to sports.
Yeah. I think we're getting someone's mic. Okay. Well, so that's interesting, right? I mean, I don't know how many Saudis are in the room with us here, but actually one thing I'm hearing is like obviously huge commitment in Saudi Arabia now to sports, and we've seen like the athletes that have been recruited, the biggest in the world moved here. Whether you're talking about soccer, obviously the commitment to golf from the top down. So like as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, and maybe Eric, like you can tell us like how your business is regionally too, and what you see and as you think about expanding. But one thing that I would love to address is like, what's the opportunity? So there's opportunities in new leagues and new sports, and there's opportunities in new countries and regions where you think like, what's an edge that Saudi has in the sports arena? And it feels like this could be an area worth talking about.
If we look at the GCC region, I think it has started over the last few years to be more accepting of crypto. You mentioned Dubai. I think it was VARA framework. The last 2 years has really become a hub, even, and sometimes not only a regional hub, but a global hub. So many companies have moved here to serve the region and beyond. We've seen other countries embracing it. Bahrain is another one, Qatar more recently, and we're hoping things will evolve also in the kingdom. That's why also I'm here. So my first time actually coming to Saudi. So I think is very good sign for the industry to see this growing in the region. What was the second part of?
Well,
yeah.
I guess just do you see an opportunity, and this can be for anybody,
Oh, yeah,
here,
for
but an
Saudi
opportunity
in particular.
here, given
Yeah.
the interest in sports and the ability to impact regulation?
I think something we've alluded to, but we didn't go into detail, is gaming. And we talked about using these collectibles also for games. And I think NFTs and digital collectibles are perfect use case for games. Hasn't been done very well until today.
My book now.
But it's coming, I think, with proper game, AAA, where the ownership has been integrated from the onset. It's not something we splash on top of an existing franchise. So that is happening, and I think the kingdom is going to have the esports committee here, and the first event. Esports, gaming, that generation, I think there's huge potential to combine the two and bring new experiences for young athletes as well. So I think that is an opportunity for Saudi.
I think we got time for one.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think there's two interesting ways to do it. One is in the football leagues. In North America, Ticketmaster controls all the ticketing. It's very hard to introduce new technology. Here, there's an ability to do something that's new, that is innovative, that is better for the fans. And so that's a place to start. And because of the control that PIF does have in the league, I think there's a lot of things that can be done. The second thing is when events come here, right, whether it's the NBA, whether it's tennis, it's golf, and there are fans buying tickets, utilize some of this new technology. It's a great way to actually introduce. If the NBA wants to come here, if the NFL eventually wants to come here, make them use this technology, right? So that way they're not beholden to Ticketmaster. They can try something that's different than Ticketmaster and then understand what the benefits are, right? I think that's a great way to start. And this region to me is the way to push things forward because in North America, we're dealing with some antiquated views.
Yep, really well put. All right, we're out of time. Grab any of us if you guys want to talk more about this. It's a topic where everybody on here is super passionate about. Thanks for joining.